this video, we're going to be looking at a recap of the accountability program so far, some of the main things we just want to remind you of, and something I like to apply towards the end of my projects, and the concept of the closer we get to the end, the harder we have to focus. Really, the 4 or 5 things that I want to point out most over this program have been things that we really want to instill within you that we think is the foundation to establishing a more creative lifestyle. The first thing I want to talk about again from the beginning of our program is intent and purpose within ourselves when we're approaching a creative project. Now, the intent and purpose really is something that is going into that intrinsic motivation, and a lot of why you are creative is within yourself. And really, sometimes we don't even know why we are creative, and it's important over the last 10 weeks of this program that you've been doing that process of investigating just exactly why you're here, and why you're here meaning why you're in front of the computer. And this is so important because when we get in the not necessarily ruts, but low parts of creative projects, maybe the 60% mark, 75% mark, where you just have to push it. You can kind of see the end of the tunnel. You can certainly see the mountain of work you achieved so far, and you just need to push. And having your intent and purpose at the forefront of your mind, we would also call this your creative mission, is incredibly important to make it through those periods. And really what we're focusing on with these reminders is consistency to completion. So consistency leads to progression, and progression to completion. One thing we hope is that you're finding different ways to inspire this intent within yourself and inspire this motivation by having great conversations with different people, or reading things that you wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to, or creating outside of your medium. And by doing this, we really hope that you are discovering more about yourself and what makes you creative, but also ways to fuel that. And if it's by recognizing that you need extra balance in your lifestyle, or extra rest, or maybe you need more work and a firmer type of kick up the ass with authority to get you moving towards your project, something that you didn't have around you before. All these things we hope that you're pulling out of this program and putting around yourself to give you a fantastic established creative lifestyle. The second one, really, I repeat it again and again, is consistency. Consistency. It leads to the success that you're expecting. Is that by being consistent in establishing our positive behaviors, we're able to turn them into habits. And by that I mean we're almost able to turn them into actions that we feel compelled to do, or are otherwise unable to progress with our day until we've engaged in that activity. Now, we're not looking to establish to the point of obsession, but we're certainly looking to establish to the point of meeting the equal perceived severity of your lifestyle. So looking at being creative as a key part of your weekly schedule, and not putting it off for other lifestyle events, or not putting it off for other busy events that you otherwise cloud yourself with to feel more productive or more driven in other areas that aren't creativity. The third thing we hope you've gotten at is the ability to start a new project straight away. And yes, the level of planning needs to be balanced. We're also talking about, you remember early on, the need to plan, very important, but over planning can really become a burden and really bog us down. That's why we talk about in the How to Start Right Now episode about taking that plan and just start and writing on the plan, on the narrative, whatever it is that comes to you in that session, without restraint and with unbridled edition. So just letting yourself go nuts, just letting it all come out into the paper really is a good stimulant to take ideas that are otherwise just sentences or maybe minor paragraphs that you're able to record in the moment, and really flesh them out into the ideas that they deserve to be. So what I mean by that is just not a raw presentation of a story that you feel is great and emotive and expressive, but actually refining that ability to sit down with the uncomfortable process of fleshing out over and over and over again. And How to Start Right Now kind of ties in today's episode as well, of how to finish, and we're going to cover that in just a moment. But I really believe in the success of the closer you get to the finish, the harder you have to focus, or the more you have to focus on that particular thing. Is that when we are starting, it's quite easy to apply that how to get started process to many different ideas. And you take the ideas, you refine them, expand them, refine them, expand them, and you have your kind of developed idea. But when you're taking that idea to the very end, you're doing that type of refining and increasing your focus, because the potential for things to go wrong increases, the potential for miscommunications increases. Things, as we get closer and closer to the end, the potential for life and your justification of it to pull you away from your project because it's getting very hard is what we'll cover in today's episode. And the last thing we want to recap is our digital community. Now, we really want to see this grow into a positive and uniting space where creators can share ideas or put their projects out for criticism or critique to make it stronger and develop. We're looking for a way that creators can network with one another so they could add each other's strengths into a singular project. We're looking to create a really positive space for creators from all over the world to come together and share their experiences. And that's entirely dependent on you and your participation in that community. Now, we are looking for leaders. We're looking for people to inspire conversation. We're looking for people to inspire reading, inspire engagement with creativity. And I really, really hope that you're one of them. Something that I've recognized within myself is that I'm very good at starting things. I'm very good at coming up with ideas for stories. I'm very good at fleshing them out to a first draft, or realistically, I would probably call it a working draft. I'm good at getting things up to 90%, but what I realized about 5 years ago is that I had a lot of things in my life that were just stagnated at that 90% mark. And how was I able to combine my efforts really to get it over that 10%? And what I started to discover with some of these really large projects that I was taking on was that the last 10% of these really large scale projects required more energy and effort than the first 90% combined. What I mean by that is, as I mentioned earlier, it's really easy to come up with an idea, touch wood, so to speak. When we're hit with inspiration, it's very easy. And it's easier to flesh that idea out than it is to refine and grind an idea into its final form. So we can often get, or young writers can often get confused by the ease of the starting of an idea with that is going to be the ease that's maintained throughout the whole process. So one thing that I found really helped me was accepting from very early on that the start is the easy part, and I need to be saving all of my energy by moderating my effort in the first 90% for the final 10%. This stopped me from going 110% for the first portion of the project and just gassing myself out. So I would have sessions where I wouldn't be productive, and this would go on for a couple of days, maybe even weeks at a time, and I would be wondering what is happening, and I would try to put more work into the early stage of the process. When what I've come to realize now is that those are actually moments to let it go for a moment, for just a brief time, not long enough that you forget about it, and return to it with a fresh mind. Because really you need to be applying that grinding mentality at the last 10%. When there's very little creation to be done, it's more manipulation, changing, the small things that really, as creators, we don't even see coming. It's when we show the project to a third party that we get all these comments that we just weren't expecting. That's another part of it, is that I've noticed in a lot of creative projects that I produce and that I am creating myself, is that whenever I think, or the creator thinks it's at the end, generally there's a few more steps to go. And when there's a perception that you, the creator, are at the end of your project, and some third party tells you that you actually have a whole bunch of work to do, it can be, if you're not prepared for it, a very confronting experience. So this is, again, it leads into the justification for why I've developed this mentality within myself to help with those things, is that every time I submit, even if I think it's the final project, I am still open to receiving criticism, receiving reviews, and I'm open to the fact that I will probably have to apply those beyond the point where I think it's done. And this, in nearly every experience I've had is uncomfortable, it is confronting, but the project comes out better in the end. And really, as a creator, we have to just take the emotions not out of it, but to the side when we're dealing with those type of instances of publishing, and just accept that we are here to make the project as strong as possible, and we don't want to rush it through just because we didn't want to apply the last few pages of edition. So really this working extra hard in the 10% helps me in a different range of ways. It helps me network with the people that are close to projects at the end. It helps me manage my own emotions, because if they get low in that part as well, it's very vulnerable that the project can stop, really. I mean, I've seen people, and I've experienced it myself, when you get in such an emotional state that you're 93%, but you just can't imagine doing that final 7% for whatever reason it is. Physically, you can't sit down, you get squirmy and just completely restless. Mentally, you can't even switch on. There's something about that. And if you turn away from that, you are, if we go back to our fork in the road analogy, you are opening yourself up to be more prone, like I was, to turn away from tasks when they get to that final difficult push that's necessary to completion. And the tendency to rush is a normal process, especially when you've experienced the project for so long. And you really, in the early stage of edition, you make massive steps forward with the changes of the document, change in writing style, change in setting, characterization. All these things happen massively in the first rounds of edition. What can add to the frustration in this final 10% is the fastidiousness that the editions become, is that we're talking about comma placements, we're talking about tonality, we're talking about some really, what I would say is actually borderline subjective interpretations on what you're also trying to say in terms of that authorial intent. And that can add, what I've seen add to creators' frustration, because it feels like we were making massive strides before, and now we're crawling, absolutely crawling, and we're looking at these tiny, minute details, when before we were talking about these really fantastic things about my whole story and all these other things. So it's just really important to be prepared for a type of funnel, really. And as you can imagine the funnel like that. As you get closer to the funnel of completion, you really increase that pressure, and you increase the need to focus, and you increase that need for concentration. For all these reasons that I'm mentioning, really, is that you're looking at the 1% increments in this stage. You're looking to improve it by tiny little fractions, not making these large open-ended sweeps. I really believe that accepting this mentality and applying it across many different projects for a period of 5 years, really commit to yourself of that anything that I start, the first 90% will be the easiest part. And I am starting this with an acceptance that I will commit everything to the final 10%. Is that when you are able to apply this regularly to your life, you'll start to see hurdles and obstacles and really overcome them with ease. You'll see them get smaller and smaller, and you'll be able to jump over them to almost what becomes a step. And what other people would experience as a massive hurdle, this mountain, you will start to perceive as just another obstacle. And you can get around anything. When you get in this mentality, you start to experience these things as givens of where you're at in the process. Is that, oh, you want me to rewrite an entire chapter? Of course you do. I'm in the final 10%. Oh, you want me to cut an entire chapter that I spent 3.5 months developing because you requested it? Sure, no worries. I'm in the final 10%. Now you can tell that that's a very personal story, and you can see that this has to just be one of the things. And one of the things that we as creators accept, I should clarify, is that our vision and the integrity of the communication need to be really united. So putting them out in this last 10% to those people for that feedback, when we see the difference in our vision and what the market are taking away from it, it can be very confronting, especially because you thought you were finished. So just all these perceptions and expectation management is really important as a creator, because again, we're self-managed, and self-managed means self-evaluative. And by doing that, we need to be kind to ourselves, and that's extremely important. And another thing that I really need to clarify with applying this mentality is that we're really trying to only grind in the last 10%. What I mean by grind is you wake up, you're doing a little bit before breakfast, you have your breakfast, you're doing a little bit between breakfast and lunch, you have lunch and a break, you do some before dinner, and after dinner you do it until bed. That's what I've experienced in the last 10% for a couple months to get the project over the line. And when you're accepting this and you're able to relegate that time investment to the end, we're able to experience a more comfortable process of the creation. Is that when we apply that mentality to the beginning of the project, we quickly start to forgo social interactions and we forgo maybe extracurricular work events. Really, we can't sustain that over the whole project. You'll start to erode your social relationships. You'll start to weaken your position at work. You'll start to figuratively put all your eggs in one basket when really we're trying to incorporate a balanced creative lifestyle. So one day when we can make creativity your whole life, that'll be fantastic. But at the moment we have to recognize that we're really trying to incorporate it in a healthy way that leads to long-term sustainability. So grinding in the first 10% when you're planning your story is not an effective use of your time for the length or long-term success of the project, for your own mentality, and for the those around you. So really, when we're using this 10%, it's important to save up that mentality and that grinding approach for the end when it's needed, because you're going to want to moderate your energy investment into your story in that first 90%. And really, you'll hopefully experience what I mean by the energy you put into when you're creating your first draft is almost flowy and seamless, because there is no one or no third party authority around you to tell you or to suggest to you that your vision should be communicated this way or that way to get a better reaction or to resonate better with the readers. So when we're applying the strategy, it's just important to keep it to the end and not to apply the go full ball the whole time, but to moderate it and save it for that last 10%. This mentality and working the hardest, the combined effort of the first 90% in the last 10% of a project has helped me a lot. It's helped me in various aspects of my life, but particularly with creativity in persisting through a project and not having the tendency to come up with a new idea when I start to lag or stagnate on a particular idea that I had earlier. And quite often that idea was started from the same procrastination cycle. So by also applying yourself and sitting down and applying the seam of your pants to the seam of the chair beyond the point of discomfort, it generates that same training and it generates that same resistance tolerance where it becomes easier to sit down. Hurdles become smaller, obstacles become easier to overcome. And this mentality, when we apply it consistently, really, I think, improves a lot of my approach to large-scale projects. And a lot of creativity is a large-scale project. It's helped me complete more as well, which has really helped me feel more positive in my creativity, because rather than just tossing around some stories, I'm actually completing them to the point of I can review a whole story, I can develop on it. It's better than coming back to a half-completed story with half-written notes for the finish of it, because the longer I leave those half-baked projects, the more resistant I am to actually come back and finish them. So I hope that this mentality helps you a little bit. It's important to establish from the beginning that you're able to apply your energies, because it's difficult to ask yourself to put in 110% if you have already been doing that for the whole process. And you will rarely see the increase in output if you have been maintaining that type of 100 hours. And generally the words will be half thought out and not really to the standard of your writing anyway. So by applying the moderation throughout the first 90%, we really have the energy in store to give it our all in the last 10%.